Hello everyone, my name is El Parnaso and in today's video we're jamming against Light and Darkness Ritual. So don't forget to leave a like, subscribe and share the channel with your people so we can grow. Also don't forget that I'm going more in depth about how to approach the Ritual and Darkness variants for your WCQ in my best Yummy Finsmith Masterclass. I'm gonna leave the link so you can check it out and you can review all this amazing content. And by the time that you are watching the video, it will be added a new section of jamming against Light and Darkness Ritual with a new video besides this one. So now let's talk about it. The first thing that we need to understand about this, about how to jamming against this deck, is understanding this deck, right? So let's see. The first thing that you need to understand is the value of the Grifo. Grifo, at least to me, is the best card that they have because it's the card that allows them to at least attempt to function. Why? Because this is the only one that can actually work by itself to put you in a position to play the game. What do I mean by this? All these other cards that you see, regardless of how powerful you may think they are when they are resolving, they need to resolve first. And in order to resolve and that resolution to actually do something against your opponent, you need combinations of these kind of cards for each and every one of the rest of it. If not, 3 combinations of cards. Usually the 2 card combinations this deck will have is only because of the power, how powerful Grifo is. Like even this asshole, for me to make Graceful Charity, you need to reveal another card of the engine. So, you know, let's start with this one. Why I'm saying this is the one that allows you to play. This is the only one that works by itself. Why? Because you can discard these cards, then activate this effect. Set 1 quick spell or trap that mentions Light and Darkness Ritual from your deck. It can be activated this turn, and this is a quick effect. Therefore, they can use this during your turn. So not only as a way to play. However, if they use this on your turn by itself, how much can it do? Because if you only have this and only this, the Grifo, you are setting the Mind Shuffle. Because of Grifo, you can activate this Mind Shuffle and do its shit during your opponent's turn, right? But what is that shit? Let's see. You can add 1 monster that mentions Light and Darkness Ritual from your deck to your hand, then discard 1 card, right? So then you have another way to, like, this don't sound that strong, but it's kind of a consistency thing, and the discarding is what actually allows the Grifo to be a 1 card starter because the Mind Shuffle can add the Skull Archifiend of Chaos, whatever, and you can discard the same Skull Archifiend that you added because this guy has an interesting effect when it comes to the purpose of Grifo. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can send 1 ritual spell from your hand or deck to the graveyard as cost. You can see by the dot comma. Add 1 ritual monster whose name is mentioned on that card from your deck to your hand. So basically, this one can send the Light and Darkness Ritual to the graveyard, and then can add any of the rituals that you may need. And the ritual has a very interesting interactions. So first, let's see the graveyard effect. If this card is in your graveyard, you can add this card and 1 card that mentions Light and Darkness Ritual from your deck to your hand. Because of how you play the game here, you have both Light and Darkness Ritual and Skull Archifiend of Chaos in your graveyard. Therefore, this effect is already alive, and the 2 cards that you use and the card that you use is going to be recycled to your hand with the ritual spell. Now you may think, but Parnaso, both rituals are level 7 and this asshole is level 6. So what do I do after that? Well, actually the Light and Darkness Ritual, well, the light went on, so you just have to get used to the reflect of my black face. So as I was saying, the The Light and Darkness ritual has a very interesting interaction because, let me see here. You must also tribute monsters from your hand or field and or banish monsters from your graveyard whose level equals or exceeds the level of the ritual monster, right? And why is this important? Because Grifo says at the very end, if your ritual summon exactly one level 8 ritual monster with a card effect that requires use of monsters, this card can be used as the entire tribute, right? So all these assholes are not level 7, sorry, are level 8. Therefore, you fulfill the purpose of the Grifo for these specific monsters, or any kind of ritual level 8 monster whatsoever, right? But you can see here the synergy and how Grifo is actually the best card in the deck, because it's the only card in the whole deck, in the whole engine, that by itself can do something. It puts you in a position when you have the ritual, you have the follow-up with the Skull Archifiend, you have the Mind Shuffle already face up on the field. Like, you get my point, right? And if you draw it in combinations with with a lot of these other cards, like for example, the Grifo and any of the rituals, you are in a position when you can actually use it as a hand trap in the sense of disruption, because it means that you can special summon the Black Luster Soldier during your opponent's turn. But even then, even in that position of combinations and everything resolving, like not like your opponent just don't interact with Mind Shuffle or the Skull Archifiend, the interruption that you're getting is this one. If this card is a special summon, you can target one card your opponent controls, banish it. So all that effort just to make, a banish that targets is not that profitable when you see it that way, right? And when you consider that everything else the deck can do is kind of fake, well, the deck is not very well positioned, right? That doesn't mean that you should disrespect the deck. That is why I am making this brief summary of how the deck works, so you can, if you face the deck, you can kind of understand the synergy and the value of the cards. Because obviously, every every Light and Darkness ritual will play Grifo. They will play at least one Skull Archifiend of Chaos because of what I just said. However, I don't know if a lot of people will play the Celtic Mystic, for example, because of how weak it actually is. Like, yes, this fence sounds crazy. You can draw 2 and then discard 2 cards. The restriction of special summoning ones from the extra deck is not that big because you are focused more on the ritual shenanigan, right? However, the requirements for this card to work is kind of shitty. As we already said, you need to reveal a card that mentions Light and Darkness ritual, but you also need to reveal your entire hand. So yes, you're going to draw 3, but you are revealing all the other cards too. So I don't see how investing your normal summon and also exposing your whole hand is worth it. Now, you can make the argument for the other effect. You can tribute this card, special summon one ritual monster that mentions Light and Darkness ritual from your hand. Because this will be an extra way, plus the Light and Darkness ritual or the Mind Shuffle, to get your ritual monsters in circulation, right? However, this still implies that you need to summon the Celtic Mystic. This still implies that the Celtic Mystic needs to stay on the field because this is not a trigger effect. And therefore, if you are facing a deck like, for example, Yami, this card is just going to be a waste of your normal summon. They can, because as soon as you summon it, before you can even use the tribute effect that is not quick, you can just go with Cookie Yami way and set the monster, and that monster ain't doing shit. Another thing you can do is you can just negate the effect with the High Caesar. So I don't see how a lot of people are going to decide to actually play the Celtic Mystic because of how much exposed the deck, even though some effects kind of sound crazy, right? So again, this effect that they are obtained, so this is from the monsters. They'll like these specific monsters. The rituals, I I consider like they are just going to play one of them because of how the recursion of the deck works, even through the banish pile, thanks to the Skull Archifiend. Like if this card is in your hand or graveyard, you can target 3 other cards in the graveyards and or face-up banishments. This is important. Remember that it also includes your graveyard. So this disruption in the graveyard is something that you need to respect. However, this is not a quick effect, so we are again in a position when you're just dealing with what your opponent is doing in their own turn, which is not that big of a deal in 2026, right? So regardless of that, this is a very good effect because it's a disruption in the graveyard or banishment of both players and allows the circulation of all your ritual cards. That is why you can afford, for example, just one of the big bricks in the ritual monsters. And maybe from with the passage of time, people will start to play either just one Light and Darkness Ritual or one Mind Shuffle. The problem with that is how the deck really needs these cards in circulation. So when it comes to play against a Yami deck, for example, these cards will constantly get like cards like Skull Archifiend, cards like Grifo, cards like Light and Darkness are just so dependent of the graveyard that they are just making cards like Lollipop Yamiway a lot better. At the end of the day, your own engine has a way to disrupt your opponent's graveyard constantly in a way that it will depend of what you need at that specific moment, right? Like maybe you don't need to necessarily banish the card, but sending it back to the deck is also something really strong against it. They need the Grifo in the graveyard so they don't waste materials for the Light and Darkness Ritual. They need the Light and Darkness Ritual in the graveyard so they can make their resources back. They need the Skull Archifiend in the graveyard in order to use its disruption effect. Otherwise, they need to use it from the hand since the beginnings, and that is not that optimal. They need, and now that we're talking about Lollipop, let's go for one of the other cards that a lot of people are scared when it comes to face this deck, the Black Chaos. So let's read it because the summoning condition is the first thing that you need to be aware, especially when you are a Yami deck. Cannot be normal summon set, that's fine. Must be a special summon from your hand by shuffling one spellcaster or warrior ritual monster from your hand or graveyard into the deck. Now, this is kind of a big deal when it comes to a Yami player going against any kind of Light and Darkness Ritual variant, because this summoning condition does not start a chain. This is an inherent summon, which means that this won't trigger any of your Yami synchros. Out of nowhere, there is a 3000 monster that can not only go over your synchros, but can do a lot of shit that you need to be aware in order for these cards to not surprise you and how to deal with it. Because, I mean, it has also kind of a consistency thing when it can put the Mind Shuffle face up, but that is not a quick effect, so it's just kind of more of a consistent thing. So technically the Grifo and the Black Chaos can do the same in the sense that both of them are a ritual material in the graveyard because of this being a level 8 too, and this working as the full requirement, right? However, this is not a quick effect, which cuts the possibility of having the disruption of the Black Luster Soldier, so it's kind of worse in that sense, right? Technically compensates this issue with the card being a disruption by itself as a monster on the field, something that Grifo can do, right? But nevertheless, the point here is that you have that consistency. So you have two starters, just one being kind of better because it can be during your opponent's turn, blah blah. And then while you have a ritual spell in your graveyard, this card is unaffected by your opponent's activated effects. So this is nothing new. Like a kind of a boss monster, like being unaffected by your opponent's activated effects by fulfilling a condition is nothing new. You can see it right here, literally the same. This card is unaffected by your opponent's activated effects while it has 5 or more materials, right? 5 or more materials having a ritual spell in your graveyard. So the same shit, right? So obviously it's still a strong condition because this card has another powerful effect. Once per turn, during your main phase, you can banish 2 cards your opponent controls. So if you fulfill the scenario when you special summon the Black Chaos and you have the ritual spell in your graveyard, your opponent basically can't do anything against 2 non-target banishing. Okay, and I understand that sounds really strong, right? But let's think about, again, the condition of the card in order to get to this point. Like this one right here. While you have a ritual spell in the graveyard, how many ritual spells this deck can play and how many times they can generate it, like, successfully. We already saw that they can generate the Light and Darkness by the Grifo, and to the point that they can even use it twice. Like they can ritual summon twice. One because of the Light and Darkness, and the other one by the Mind Shuffle. They can special summon a ritual monster twice. However, the issue there is that by you doing the Grifo play, you are not generating also the Black Chaos. You feel me? And if you use the Black Chaos to generate the Mind Shuffle so they can generate the ritual in the graveyard, you are already discarding the Black Chaos. So you can see that first, the scenario when you have both Black Chaos and the ritual spell in the graveyard, just by you being uninterrupted, is very unlikely. Also, you need to remember this card can special summon itself during your turn, and the effect of making the 2 banishes is not a quick effect. So again, we are in a scenario when the card is only good when your opponent is playing during its own turn, which is something that in 2026 is not that big of a deal, regardless of how powerful the effect is. Because if the other decks are doing their shit also during your turn, it means that you need to successfully do this shit only during your turn while your opponent is doing its shit both turns already. Their turn and now your turn. So the deck is kind of behind when you see it that way, right? So, and that is the next problem. The Black Chaos, in order to be unaffected, needs this Light and Darkness ritual. Therefore, if you have ways to deal with the Light and Darkness ritual in the graveyard, this card becomes kinda shitty. Very shitty. And again, you have a deck that constantly interacts with your opponent's graveyard during your turn and during your opponent's turn, because generating Lollipop Yami is very simple for the deck. Even if they just summon the guy without activating anything and they just feel the greatest player in the world, like you can just activate your surprise set and return the ritual spell. Not only that, if you see that they generated during their plays this chaos guy, like they're pushing the board and they're searching during the pushing of the board, and you know that they have it, remember, because this is an inherent summon, it's not a quick effect summon, which means that before they have the priority to make this inherent summon, you can do quick effects, right? Therefore, if you see that they already added, and maybe they have a ritual monster in the graveyard, you can use your Lollipop. You have the advantage of the Lollipop returning that or banishing that ritual monster. So they can even fulfill the requirements to special summon the Black Chaos to begin with. Or they will need to waste another card. Like, again, I would rather focus on the Light and Darkness not being in the graveyard, because you stop the recursion of the deck, you are forcing him to create the Light and Darkness ritual again, and that is kind of complicated for the deck, especially when all the deck is built around the idea of having access to Light and Darkness ritual constantly, especially and having it in the graveyard, so Black Chaos don't get imperm and is just a 3000 Nibiru asshole on the field, right? So you can see how against this match, your best Yami will be Lollipop Yami, because of how the deck wants to work with Griffo in the graveyard, Ritual and Darkness in the graveyard, even the Ritual monsters in the graveyard sometimes, and the disruption of Skull Archiving. So this is just a brief exposure against these cards. Obviously, the ones you need to worry about the most, the Griffo and the Black Chaos, because those are the ones that will allow your opponent to actually play. And the Black Chaos is basically the biggest threat against your Yami cards, because these don't target and it has the chance to be unaffected. And all of your Yami cards effects are activated effects. So this card is basically a Mood Dragon, immune to everything that you do. Now, you realize these are technically the real boss monsters, but when it comes to specifically the Yami deck, the both of these ones sucks. Like, yes, I know that both of them says that they are unaffected by your opponent's activated effects, like you can see it right here too. However, there's also another thing they say. Unless they target this card, right? This one says the same. Unless they target this card. Now, what's the problem with that? All of your Yami interactions targets in order to do their shit. This one targets in the graveyard, but targets. This one targets on the field. The surprise targets on the field. The cookie targets to destroy. The synchro targets to set. So everything your deck do, your Yami cards do, targets. Like, you can make the argument, even the SP targets, okay? So that unaffection from the rituals, you don't actually care 2 ounces of shit, right? As you can see. Because it is basically a non-pets when you are playing Yami. So the thing that you actually need to care about, not even this asshole, is this one. Not the effect to recover a spell. That is kind of fine, because what spell they are recovering? Like, this shit? Like, who cares, right? So so let me just go by the thing that you actually need to care about. Also, spell traps you control cannot be destroyed or banished by your opponent's card effects. This is kind of important, and you always need to try to double check the timing, because maybe you can feel really secure about, oh, I'm gonna use my Akruki to target the Mind Shuffle. I'm gonna target, or maybe I'm going to use my SP Little Knight to try to push that Mind Shuffle, or whatever, right? Like, you see my point. You need to be careful with that, because, like, or try to respect the possibility of they chaining Mind Shuffle to a special summon this Magician of Dark Chaos, and therefore, by the floodgate effect it has that we just read, that you are just wasting your Akruki, you are just wasting your SP on summon, blah blah blah. Okay, like, you get my point. So this is something that you really need to consider, and you really need to respect, also by your side deck patterns and by your side deck decisions, because if you are putting the Duster or the Lightings, you need to respect this effect always. Okay, so I already again talk about this. The problem with this effect as a disruption is that it targets. So what is going to actually target in your Yami board? Like, they are going to target the synchro? Of course not, because it can just tag, right? They are going to target the field spell? Maybe, but at that point, what the fuck are you doing, right? You are not making me lose disruptions. This is a card that I still can recover thanks to Marshmallow from the Banish, and I still will have a Crookie during the development of my disruptions to make the actual disruption against you, right? So you can make the argument, hey, maybe you can target the Wave Caesar, right? But if you go to the point that you are making high Caesar by developing your combo going second, like, your opponent just allow you to play so much that you should have got rid of that Mind Shuffle way before doing the High King Caesar. Because remember, technically High Caesar can negate the effect, however it can't, because the card says when a spell trap card is activated. So you need to remember this. Mind Shuffle is already face up and is not activating itself, is activating its effect, its second effect, when your opponent activates a card effect, here, right here. So High Caesar can negate effects. Therefore, Caesar can negate Mind Shuffle if they flip it and then use its effect. So you need to be careful with that. And you need to respect that. Please don't think that your High Caesar will negate Mind Shuffle and then you are secure and blah, blah, blah. Don't do it. In that scenario, you may be very, very hard punished. Okay? So let me just go back here. So respect Mind Shuffle, and as long as you respect it, I think you will be fine against this deck, because the deck first needs to resolve the problem of actually playing the game. Because, for example, you can say, oh, like, because now the deck is also very vulnerable to a lot of popular hand traps in the current format. For example, Light and Darkness Ritual Yorem. It sounds amazing, right? You can banish materials from the graveyard to use it. You know what that means? It means that this card can get hit by Bell. And people are playing Bell. So, you know? Also, what a lot of people are starting to play? The Ogres. Ogre is really good against Mind Shuffle, as you can see, right? Like getting rid of the continuous effect, getting rid of the actual card, so you're putting your opponent in a position when they need to generate it again, if they even are allowed to do so. So you can see that Bell and Ogre are not always in the format, but they are right now. So the deck is kind of weaker when you consider these kind of things, because even after that, yeah, you can make the argument for Imperm not being that good, but Imperm and Fua are not that good, and these are very popular, so this is kind of an advantage, but at the end of the day, it's just a single one advantage, you know, because after the side deck, these cards can easily be replaced with something else. Maybe not the Imperms, but definitely the Fuas, because at the end of the day, Imperm is also targets, so these two are affected by the Imperm. And if you get rid of the protection of the Black Chaos, the Imperm exchange just really good against this shit, right? So the argument at the end of the day will be to take out the Fuas when it comes to high quality hand traps, because the Ash Blossom is also really good. It can negate the Skull to search. It can negate the Mind Shuffle one turn. So it actually works really nice. The only hand trap that from the cards for the pool of hand traps that you could be expecting is the Fua. But even when it comes to Yami Fiensmith specifically, you don't care that much about your Fua not being good as a hand trap, because you can use it as an extender thanks to Salamangreat Almirage, or you can just discard it, so you can have two Yami names after you use Capsi Yami Way added, instead of adding one and sending the other one to the graveyard. So, and just by playing one bad hand trap against this matchup, when all of the other hand traps that you are deciding already for other decks are really good against this one. Ghostbell is really good, Ghost Ogre is really good, Imperm is really good, Ash is really good, Fuwa sucks, but it's just one. And also, you need to remember, because you are playing Yami Fiensmith, you are playing Dominus Purge, which is also an excellent card against the deck, because it's like a second Ash Blossom for the purposes, right? Negates the Skull, negates the Mind Shuffle, so that's really great for this card. Now, you can see how this ritual deck has a lot of problems today to work as an engine. Like, the Chaos Magical Hats, people are not going to play it. Like, you can just read it and figure that out by yourself. They will play two Mind Shuffles instead of a copy of the Magical Hats, because Mind Shuffle is the card that you actually want. And as you can see by reading the effects, this is the card that actually allows you to play more, and at the same time allows you to be kind of a disruption, right? So that is why we're not talking about that card. Now, because of all of these problems, you can make obviously the conclusion that this deck don't work by itself, because obviously it sucks. It just sucks too much, right? So people are going to try to mix it with different shit that you should not be worried about too much either, but we are not going to consider it. Like, for example, oh, a ritual deck. like Skull Archfiend can search Habakiri. So yeah, can search Habakiri if you don't have your brick in your hand. And also it can search Habakiri only if you play 4 more bricks in the deck, which is something that you also need to realize here. Like, let's say that we are not playing the Celtic Mystic, just for purposes of consistency, right? Even here, we are playing 1, 2, 3, shit. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 bricks. And even before adding the Mitsurugi bricks, let's see, you're playing 10 cards that sucks by themselves. And even in combination, a lot of them just really sucks still, right? And so you can see how, yes, the idea of mixing 2 ritual decks can be good. And maybe your opponent will draw Habakiri, Grifo, Call by the Grave, and they will win the dice roll and maybe they will beat you. But it's not a consistent idea still. So maybe you can make side deck decisions that go against. So what I think is a really good decision is considering cards in the side deck that goes against the variants that are adding in their decks the Ritual and Darkness. For example, cards that go thinking about cards that go against Mitsurugi instead of cards that are going for the Lycan Ritual deck. But those cards that you are putting against the Mitsurugi should be also good against just the engine cards of the Lycan Darkness Ritual. Like ideally, right? So in order to have a better frame of this, you should consider the other variant that a lot of people will start to play, like which will be the Asamina package, right? Like the Asamina package, which will be this and all of the other shit, right? Like this, the 3 wanted. So here. Now this seems kinda better, right? Like you are just playing, you are adding actually starters, things that can actually work in the 3 wanted, the Deception and the Diablaster, and you are just adding 1 brick, right? Like 1 brick for 7 cards to play, and technically cards that can work technically well with the Ritual and Darkness cards, like the Mind Shuffle fulfill the requirements bouncing these monsters because they are high level monsters, just like the Mitsurugis. Oh. And blah blah blah. Okay, so people are trying to do this shit too. Now, why I think this is such a problem? Because at the end of the day, the ritual cards are not getting to your Diablaster shit, and your Diablaster shit may get to these kind of cards, but it's kinda tricky, right? Maybe if you are starting to play like more Dark Magician shit, but even then, like maybe you are playing this package, this one, the Souls, and the Tayamios. I don't know, like different kind of targets, so they can play the Dark Magician of Chaos, right? Where is it? This one right here. So this one, by adding a card that mentions Dark Magician, can do something in some fucking shape or form that can get you to cards that interact with Light and Darkness. I don't see the value in even trying to do that, because if you are trying to meet something with the Asamina package and take advantage of the Dark Magician of Destruction, I would rather play Yami Asamina at that point. Like, instead of adding 10 bricks to my deck here, as you can see. So, but that doesn't mean that people are not going to try to do this, right? So whenever you're adding, or whenever you are deciding to think about side deck against this deck, think about the decks that they are going to mix it with it. Because if you are facing Light and Darkness Ritual pure, you're, as a Yami player, you have a lot of advantages, as you saw. You have the advantage of the Lollipop being amazing against the deck, the quality of your non-engine cards against the deck being really good, except Droplet. You like, yeah, Droplet kind of sucks, but you having the Purge is really strong. Having a ton sheet of hand traps is also strong, and you have the Caesar to basically negate everything else. So, oh shit, sorry, no, sorry. This is a very, oh damn, where is it? Okay, here it is. So you think about the possible mixes that people will do, right? The other combination that I've been seeing kind of few is the branded shit. So whenever you are thinking about this deck, think about those combinations and pick cards that are good against these three variants: Mitsurugi, Branded, and Asamina. But ideally choosing cards that are also good straight up directly against the Light and Darkness ritual cards. Still, another argument that you need to consider when you're building your deck for this World Championship qualifier is that at the end of the day, you will see, or you will have more chances to see, branded decks like Mitsurugi decks or even Asamina decks in variants than seeing straight up Light and Darkness ritual variants. So you still need to focus more in your deck building against those decks than this one. That is also why we are making this logic, because when it's all said and done, you can't make that much of a focus in a deck that, yes, is new, but involves 10 fucking bricks, okay? And even when it plays, don't do that much. Especially against the deck that you're playing, which is Yami Fiensmith, that has a lot of advantage against how that Light and Darkness ritual deck is built. So if you enjoy it, leave a like, subscribe, and share the channel with your people. Bye bye.